Hello YouTube, today we're out with the Vivo X200 Ultra, which has been my main phone since it arrived, and the Vivo X200 Pro, which was my main phone for about 6 months prior to that. Obviously certain things about the X200 Ultra make it a better camera phone, but the X200 Pro is still really good, and I think there's enough differences in the processing that it'd be worth comparing all of these lenses in a variety of lighting conditions. So whether you're trying to figure out if it's worth upgrading, or if you're just not sure which one's the right phone for you, you're watching the right video. Let's get into it. Okay, as usual, we're starting on the selfie cameras. Both of these are at 4K 30, and it's a bit of a windy day, so you might get some wind noise. We are using the internal mics, and you'll see on the screen which one you're listening to right now. Only the X200 Ultra selfie camera has autofocus, so if I get up close, you should see that I'm much clearer on the X200 Ultra than I am on the X200 Pro. However, I haven't been too impressed with the stabilization, and there's no option to turn extra stabilization on the X200 Ultra. So we'll see how it looks. Hopefully it's not too shaky. But there is a stabilization mode on the X200 Pro, which I'll turn on right now. So this one's called Steady Face, and you can see it's cropped in a bit. But how much of a difference does it make? Does it look a lot better? We will have to see in just a moment. Of course, you can also film yourself on the rear cameras, and with this setup, you've got a few different options. These are the ultra-wide cameras. Obviously, we've got a massively upgraded ultra-wide on the X200 Ultra. But how much better does it look in the day? Both of these do have autofocus, by the way, so should be sharp no matter if you're close up or further away. So now I've moved over to the main camera on the X200 Pro. We're still on the ultra wide of the X200 Ultra, but I've cropped into 24mm, so it should be about the same. Obviously you will get more subject separation with the main camera, because really we're just cropping into that ultra wide on the Ultra. But if you switch over to the main camera on the Ultra, I think this is going to be way too close up. But this is what it looks like. I am on a selfie stick, maybe I can just about get it far enough away, but I don't think it's going to look ideal. So the Vivo X200 Ultra has another trick up its sleeve. It's got a widened angle mode, which turns down the stabilization bit, lets you get more in the shot. On the ultra wide like we're on right now, I think that's going to be too wide, but it might mean we could use the main camera for like a vloggy style shot. So let's try that. So now I'm on the main camera of both phones with the widened angle mode turned on. Is it too shaky? Is it still too close? I can't see the screen right now, so we'll have to see in the edit. Okay, let's test the stabilization on the rear cameras at 4K 30. This is the ultra wide, and I'm walking along at a normal pace. Now here's with a quick jog. Switching to the main cameras, obviously we've got a big difference in focal length now. But here's walking along normally, and here's with a quick jog. 85mm on both. Still more of a crop on the X200 Ultra. I think that's just from digital stabilization. This is walking along normally, and here's a quick jog. Now we'll do the same thing again, but with the widened angle on the X200 Ultra. See what that looks like. This is walking along normally on the ultra wide, and here's a quick jog. Main camera on both, walking along normally, and here's a quick jog. 85mm on both, walking along normally, and with a quick jog. Both phones have an ultra stabilization mode, which I've activated now. On the Ultra, it works on all lenses. On the Pro, it only works on the main and the telephoto. So let's try it out. I'm walking along normally, and here's a quick jog. Now switching to the main. Actually doesn't look like I can switch to the telephoto in this mode. I might have to stop the recording and start it again. But here's the main versus the main, walking along normally, and a quick jog. So now we're on the 85mm on both phones, ultra stabilization mode turned on, walking along normally, and here's a quick jog. Okay, video zoom test at 4K 30 frames per second. We're on the ultra wide of both phones. Now the main. Now the 85mm. We'll push it out to the max, which is 460mm on the ultra and 20 times on the Pro. Let's see if we can see any difference in the stabilization and the detail. Both of these phones have portrait video mode, which works on the selfie camera, which is what we're using right now. The main difference is that the Ultra can do Zeiss biotar simulation, whereas there's no options for different simulations on the Pro. Not really a big deal. Both of these are in the same default profile at the moment, and I have natural portrait filter turned on. They've both got basically the same filters. When it comes to the rear cameras, on the Pro you can use the main or the telephoto, can't use the ultra wide. On the Ultra you can use all three. But how they doing with the cutout? How they doing with my hands? They always seem to mess up my fingers. We'll see how they do here. What about when I get up close and move further back? Okay, I'm going to try something a bit different for the autofocusing test. We'll see how well this works. Just going to put my hand in front of the cameras and move it away and see how quick each one adjusts. Both looking pretty quick. Say the Ultra is a hair quicker on the ultra wide. Now switching to the main camera. Obviously slightly different focal length. Both can focus pretty close up. About there. Not so quick, but very smooth on both. Pro didn't adjust there, I don't think. Pro's really hunting. Ultra seems a bit more reliable. Now the telephoto. Incredible macro capabilities on both. It's the same sensor after all. A little bit slower, but it does get there. Pretty decent. Okay, it's night time. We're back on the selfie cameras. We're at 4K 30. And I'll be interested to see how these do. I've not been too impressed with the Ultra standalone in these conditions. But I've got to say here, next to the Pro, neither of them looking too impressive in these conditions. What do you think? Which one's doing a better job with the exposure? Which one's got better stabilization? And which one's less noisy? Okay, now I've switched over to the ultra-wide cameras on the rear, and obviously we've got a massively upgraded sensor on the Ultra, so that should look a lot better. Should see less noise, should be cleaner, maybe a little bit more background separation, but I can't see the screen right now, so how are we looking? Okay, now I've got the X200 Pro on its main camera, and on the Ultra we're punched into 24mm on the ultra wide, and here we should see the opposite. I'm expecting the 200 Pro to look a lot better than the Ultra, but how much better does it look? And finally, this is the main camera on the Ultra, but I've got the angle widened mode on, so hopefully it's far enough out that you can actually see me in the shot. And the X200 Pro is still on its main camera. Alright, so quick video zoom test at 4K 30. Both of these phones are on the ultra wide. Now this is the main camera of each. This is the 85mm on each. And I'll push it all the way out to max, which is 460mm on the Ultra. 20 times on the Pro, which I believe is also 460mm. There we go, now they're lined up a bit better. Okay, now I'm just going to check the video stabilization at night. We're on the ultra wide on both phones. This is walking along at a normal pace. And here's a quick jog. Switching to the main cameras. This is walking along normally. And here's a quick jog. Finally, we'll do the telephotos. This is walking along normally, and this is a quick jog. Okay, now we're on the really dark street, and it is really dark today, so we'll see how this looks. I started in front of a street light. We're on the selfie camera. There's a street light here, so you should be able to see something if I go that way. And if I come over here, I may disappear again. Now I've switched around to the ultra wide on the rear, and I'm not expecting this to look great, but it might look decent on the Ultra, especially when we get in front of the street light here. Not expecting much from the Pro at the very least. So, what do you think? And now this is the main camera on each phone. Obviously we'll be quite close up on the Ultra, but not a lot I can do about that. And here's how it looks when I'm backlit. Now here's a quick stabilization test, just walking along at a normal pace. This is the ultra wide. This is the main camera. And this is the telephoto on each. Is there much of a difference? It's looking quite similar on the phone screens. This video is brought to you by Charge and their SharGeek 170 power bank. When I heard Charge wanted to sponsor a video, I jumped at the opportunity. I've been using a Charge power bank for years now, it's never let me down, and in my opinion they make some of the most stylish and full-featured power banks on the market today. The SharGeek 170 might be the best yet. It has a massive 24,000 mAh capacity, which is more than enough to keep all of your devices charged all day long. It has 3 outputs so you can charge 3 devices simultaneously, and it even has a built-in screen so you can see all your charging stats and know exactly what's going on. The SharGeek 170 has a unique prism-shaped design, and the brand says it's inspired by the Dark Side of the Moon album cover. It's an absolute belter of an album, so fair enough. But most importantly, it feels great in the hand and it looks great too. It's not just about the looks, this power bank is seriously quick. It'll charge at up to 140 watts and it will charge other devices at up to 170 watts. That means it can charge a MacBook Pro 16-inch at full speed, which is very handy when you're on the go. There's enough juice inside to fully charge an iPhone from flat to full about 5 times, but more realistically, you can charge all your other devices with it. Tablet, camera, drone, no matter what it is, it will charge it and it will do so really quickly. It's also IP66 water resistant, it's airline safe, and it even has a low current mode which is perfect for use with smartwatches, earbuds and things like that. I absolutely love this power bank and it's become an essential part of my travel kit. If you want to pick up one for yourself, check out the link in the description. Massive thank you to Charge for sponsoring this portion of the video, And without further ado, let's take a look at some photos. Alright, let's move on to the photos, and we're starting with a run through of all the different lenses. As you can see, I got my finger in the shot on both of these, which is a terrible start, but hey, at least it's a fair fight. All of these photos were taken in Zeiss natural colour profile, but there is a difference in the colours of the images, which I've looked at all these already. Just because they're in the same picture profile don't mean they'll look exactly the same. You can see here the greens are a bit more vibrant on the Ultra shot here. Everything looks a little more muted on the X200 Pro, and the exposure in general is just a little bit brighter on the X200 Pro. I would say the X200 Ultra looks a little bit sharper, but it is very marginal. You can tell, but it's not too dramatic. Now moving on to the main cameras, we've got a pretty big difference in focal length because we have a 35mm main on the X200 Ultra, which essentially means you're just cropped into like 1.5x on a normal phone. You'll get a lot less distortion in your image. The X200 Pro is on the main, it's not a wide angle. It is, in photography terms, a pretty wide angle. These two will be difficult to compare because of the difference in focal length. Like, obviously we're going to see more detail on the X200 Ultra because we're closer. Here the colours are much closer, and I think generally speaking, whether or not you like the 35mm focal length is going to be completely up to you. So moving on to the telephoto, and I don't think we're going to see a huge difference here. There is a difference in the hardware. We've got a wider aperture on the X200 Ultra, but otherwise very similar specs. The wider aperture is probably not going to come into play that much here. The main differences here will be in image processing. Not only do we have a different operating system, my Vivo X200 Ultra is running on Origin OS, whereas the X200 Pro is running on FunTouch OS, but we also have different processors. We've got MediaTek on the Pro, we got Qualcomm on the Ultra, and there's a new dedicated ISP on the Ultra. So I'm not seeing a huge difference in this particular shot, but speaking broadly, we should see image processing differences throughout the photo set. Here I can barely see a difference. These look about the same to me. But what happens when we push it a bit further? So now we're at 10 times zoom, and in this case I would say the level of detail is very similar, but the Pro is actually looking a little bit more natural to me. Like, especially with this foliage here in the middle of the road. It looks a little more processed in the Ultra shot, but we are splitting hairs because as a whole, these two images are basically identical. Now, when we push the images to their maximum zoom, something interesting happens. Now I would say the Ultra is looking a lot better. Obviously, neither of these photos are great. This is a massive zoom. But whatever kind of AI processing Vivo's doing on the Ultra is working a lot better than it did on the Pro. Both clearly heavily processed, and I should say this is not the same bush. It took me a moment to take a photo. I managed to get the same cars in the shot, but they are further down the road. But yeah, the Ultra is doing something differently. It looks like there's a little bit of softness to the image, but that softness looks a lot better than the crusty, over-processed look of the Pro. So while there's not really a difference in the telephoto quality, when you really push that zoom, I do think there's an improvement to the processing. Now here's an image where I think you can actually see a difference in the ultra-wide quality in the daytime. At a glance, not a big difference. The Pro has a slightly brighter exposure, which is a common theme that I've noticed. But when we zoom in, let's just look at this. I don't know what to call this tie-down thing on the bonnet of this car. It's night and day. The detail on the Ultra is miles ahead. And the same goes for the texture of the paint. You can see all the little imperfections in the surface of the paint crystal clear on the Ultra, and they're just not really captured on the Pro. You can see the same on this tie down on the right hand side, really soft on the Pro, nice and sharp on the Ultra. And even if we look at the background, obviously it's not the subject of our photo, so we don't really care if the background's a bit blurry, but the difference is crystal clear. Look how sharp the text is on the side of this burger van. Same with this text on the blue van here, looks all soft on the Pro shot. While the difference might be subtle in the day, the new ultrawide definitely makes an improvement. Alright, now another ultrawide shot to see if we can see the same thing. At a glance, very, very similar images. Not a massive difference in colour, not a massive difference in exposure.
But what about the details? If you look here at the dirt on this like rear paneling, it's so much more detailed on the Ultra compared to the Pro. Same with the texture on this canister thing at the back. Everything's a bit sharper, everything's more detailed. I wouldn't say it's like a massive difference in the day, but there's definitely a difference, which is all you can really ask for. So this one's shot at 28mm, which is a 2x digital crop of the 14mm ultra wide on the X200 Ultra, and 27mm on the X200 Pro, so a very small digital crop of the main sensor on the Pro. Again, pretty similar images. The X200 Ultra is a tiny bit brighter in this case. There's barely anything in it. And when we look at the details, I would say the Pro is a tiny bit sharper, but the main difference that I notice is the compression. The background is a little bit blurrier on the X200 Pro shot because we're using a slightly longer lens. But if you're not looking for that separation, you're just looking for a wide angle shot, I don't think you're going to see a huge difference in the daytime. I took a lot of photos with the 85mm, as I always do, because I really like that lens. But to be honest, there's not really a difference in detail in any of them. The shot's basically the same. There's a little bit of a difference in colour in this particular shot, but other than that, these two images are basically identical. They both look great. I think you really only start to see the differences in processing when you're at longer zoom lengths. And yeah, I mean, the 85mm was my favourite lens on the X200 Pro. It's just as good on the Ultra, so no complaints from me. So this shot was taken on the telephoto, and it was taken in portrait mode but with background blur turned off, which is why it says f16 in the watermark. Both have the vintage filter applied, and they're both at the same strength, but the difference in colour is quite big. I think you could just adjust it and get it to match if you wanted, but I just thought it was quite interesting that they're different, and this happened multiple times. So I've got this shot which is of the front of the same car, and you can see the exact same thing. The colours are quite different, and these two round the front were both taken at 35mm. So that's the native main camera on the X200 Ultra and a 0.5x crop of the main sensor on the Pro. If you look really closely, it's quite plain to see that the X200 Ultra looks better, which makes sense because it's the native focal length, it's not doing any kind of cropping. And the background is also a little bit blurrier due to the compression, but at a glance, they're really similar shots. I think a lot of whether you like the Ultra or not is going to come down to whether you like shooting at 35mm. The distortion is slightly different as well. I think the proportions of the car look more accurate on the Ultra shot, whereas you can still see a tiny bit of the warping on the X200 Pro, even though it's cropped in a bit. So moving on to some macro photography, these two were taken on the ultra-wide cameras. And while we've seen that the ultra-wide on the new X200 Ultra clearly has an advantage in detail in the daytime, it can't focus quite as close. The X200 Pro can focus way closer. These are both taken as close as I could possibly get while remaining in focus, and it's a pretty big difference. Personally, I don't really like to use the ultra-wide for macros, so not much of a downside to me. Like, I think the low light capabilities and the extra detail of the new ultra-wide outweigh the benefits of having macro capabilities. But if you like ultra-wide macro shots, the Pro is clearly winning here. Now moving on to the main cameras, and as you can see, we're basically getting just as close on either, and both have got some nice crisp details when we zoom in. The big difference here, I think, is the lack of distortion. Everything remains proportional and more like what I see with my eyes on the X200 Ultra. Everything's a bit stretched out and distorted on the 23mm lens of the 200 Pro. And when it comes to the telephotos, there's not really much of a discernible difference. Both of these are crazy sharp, crazy detailed, and have loads of compression to the background. In theory, the X200 Ultra should have better subject separation because it has a wider aperture, but can you see a difference? In this case, I can't really. The only real difference is that it's using a lower ISO. So sticking on the theme of close-ups for a minute, slightly less close-up, but pretty close with the ultra-wide on my cat. Very, very similar images at a glance, maybe a tiny bit more contrasty on the Ultra, but not a lot in it. Although when we zoom in, the fur looks a lot crisper and sharper on the Ultra. Like, I do think The hairs around my cat's head look a bit blurry on the Pro. Same with the nose, better skin texture on her nose. And the larger sensor means we get a shallower depth of field. You can see her paws are more out of focus on the Ultra than they are on the Pro. So these two were both taken at 35mm. Immediately I can see a difference in the compression. The paw in the foreground is much blurrier on the Ultra. In terms of sharpness, I'm not seeing a big difference. Both are looking pretty damn good to me. Ultra might pull ahead very slightly, but it's such a tiny difference that I don't think anyone will care that much. Okay, moving on to some shots with human faces in them. This is my beautiful friend George. Both of these are taken at 35mm, and they are taken in portrait mode, but they have the background blur turned off, because you can see we're at f16. We've got the vintage filter applied, and as we've shown in other photos, that does make a slight difference to the colour. George looks more pale on the Ultra shot than he does on the Pro shot, so for that reason I kind of prefer the Pro shot. Otherwise they're very similar images, and I suspect because we're at the native focal length of the Ultra, if we pixel peep we will see slightly sharper details, and I think that is the case, but it is very marginal. Both of these look pretty great. I think in the day shooting at 35mm you won't often see much of a difference. Now this very awkward selfie is taken with the selfie camera, and it is in portrait mode, but there's no filter applied, and there's a really big difference in colour here. In this case the Ultra's got it spot on. I did leave it in mirrored mode, so that's why the watermark's backwards, sorry about that. Skin tones are kind of jacked on the Pro. I'm way too pale, we're both way too pale. Ultra looks much more accurate. Both have some minor errors in the cutout. You can see a bit mist around my ear on the Ultra and a bit mist around my cheek on the Pro. But other than that, pretty good cutouts. Ultra's a little sharper, which makes sense because it has autofocus, and the skin tones are better. So pleasantly surprised with this selfie from the Ultra. Now a solo selfie. I'm seeing some of the same thing. I do look pale on the Pro shot. I think Ultra is a bit more accurate. It's been warm lately, I've got a tiny bit of a tan. I look extremely pale on the Pro shot. And the Ultra looks a tiny bit sharper, but there really is not a lot in it. And if we look at the same shot, but with portrait mode turned on, I think we'll see the same thing. Sorry, the blur is stronger on the Ultra than it is on the Pro, but I don't think that matters too much. We're not judging the background blur. Pro is sharper. I prefer the skin tones. The cutout looks the same on both. So yeah, I reckon the Ultra selfie camera is a little bit better. Alright, moving on to some nighttime shots now. Starting on the ultra wide. At a glance, very similar shots. Very similar colour processing. But when we zoom in a bit, the details are clearly sharper. Really apparent in the John Lewis sign here. That's super crisp on the Ultra. Very soft on the Pro. Really clear on the paving slabs down here. That's super soft and mushy on the Pro. All super crisp on the Ultra. Now moving over to the main lenses. This gives you a good idea of the difference in the field of view, but these will be quite hard to compare. Everything's going to look a tiny bit sharper on the Ultra just because it's more zoomed in, but both of these look great. After all, it is the same sensor, just with a different lens. The main difference, as always, is the distortion and the field of view. Got a lot more in the shot on the Pro, but our lines aren't as straight. Like the churro van looks a little squished and warped, whereas it's more like what I saw with my eyes on the Ultra shot. Moving on to the telephoto, and guess what? Looks about the same on both. I can't really see any difference. So, and even when we zoom a bit further to 10x, there's a tiny difference in colour, but otherwise they're looking about the same to me. Now I've got a couple nighttime close-ups on this random plant. These are both on the main cameras, and as always the difference is going to be the field of view, the distortion and the compression. Really like the soft natural bokeh that we get on the 35mm on the Ultra, but you still get loads of subject separation and background blur on the Pro. It just looks slightly different. Details are crisp on both, but I would say the Ultra looks a tiny bit sharper. The main difference is that field of view and whether or not you like a aspherical 35mm shot. Now same location, using the ultra wides of both phones. And you can see here that the Pro has struggled with blur, Don't know if that's the plant moving or if my hand was shaking a bit, but either way, the Ultra has managed to overcome it, and the Pro's not. Slightly blurrier background on the Ultra from the larger sensor, and our foreground is slightly blurrier too, but it's not a huge difference. Okay, some nighttime selfies now, and both of these were set to f2 in the default blur mode, but interestingly the Ultra is definitely blurrier in the background, which could be a good or a bad thing depending on your preference. I think it looks quite good. Massive difference in colour as we saw in the day. I do look paler in the Pro shot. I think the Ultra is probably more accurate because I was stood in front of very warm light and you can see that warmth on my face, whereas that's kind of been lost on the Pro. It's kind of made the lighting slightly cooler than it was in real life. Cutout looks good on both, not really seeing any major errors, but the Ultra is way sharper. And if we zoom in, I've got some unusual AI wigglies on my mustache stubble on the Pro, whereas everything looks natural on the Ultra. For me, it's no contest. The selfies from the Ultra are looking way better. And same shot, but with portrait mode turned off. And perhaps unsurprisingly, we're seeing the exact same thing. Stubble looks way more natural on the Ultra. Everything looks sharper on the Ultra. Colours look better on the Ultra. I'd even say the texture on my hoodie looks sharper as well. It's just done a better job here. Now a selfie using the rear ultra-wide camera. Something's gone wrong with the Pro. These colours are nasty. Way too much greens. Shadows are too dark on my face. I'm much more happy with the exposure on the Ultra here. And it's much sharper and more detailed. Unsurprisingly, that upgraded ultra-wide does a better job with people at night. Now to main camera selfies. And as always, the big difference is the field of view and the compression. Skin tones look identical on both. Colours look pretty much identical on both. We're just punched in further on the Ultra. But I really like that compression. I really like how soft the background is on the Ultra shot. But I'm not really seeing any difference in sharpness or skin tones or anything. It's just a different look. It's a little it's a little close for a selfie, but it looks good. And there's no portrait mode turned on. That's the natural blur you get from this camera, which is pretty sick and like pretty rare to see from a smartphone. Anyway, both of these are great. Which one's right for you depends on your preferences, but they're both really good. Now a couple photos from the really dark street on the ultra wide, and neither are looking too great, but it was really dark, so there's only so much you can do. Yeah, both are pretty bad, but the Ultra's way better. Unsurprisingly, larger sensor equals better low light performance. Like, look how soft everything is on the Pro shot. Much sharper, much more detailed on the Ultra. Still not a good image, but it's a better image. Now two main lens shots, and I will say the Pro is more accurate on the colours here for sure. I don't know why the Ultra has warmed everything up. These street lights give off a very cool light. It doesn't. This is way too warm. And the Pro actually looks a little bit sharper here. Yeah, Pro's definitely sharper here. I don't know how much we can read into this. In this particular case, the Pro has done better on the main lens on the really dark street. Now on the telephoto, and this is quite an interesting one. Something's clearly gone wrong with the Ultra here. I mean, the details are there on both, but we've got this horrible green cast in the foreground and all this blocking, whereas the Pro hasn't had this issue at all. The Pro took a significantly longer exposure, and I think it's done more of a night mode thing, whereas maybe the Ultra didn't kick into night mode. I don't know. Either way, the Ultra looks terrible in this case. It should do better because it's got the wider aperture, but whatever. The Pro software's had longer to mature, and it's done a better job on the telephoto on the really dark street. Okay, I think that's about it for this one. I hope you found it useful. I think without a doubt, these are two of the best camera phones available right now. And if you decide to buy either of these, I really don't think you're going to be disappointed. The biggest differences are the ultra-wide and the main camera. The ultra-wide on the X200 Ultra is just superior in all conditions. I think it's particularly evident at night
and especially in video, the stabilization is in a whole different league at nighttime. The quality of the main sensor isn't really any different. It's the same sensor after all, but it's got that 35mm field of view. For me, that's great. I really like a 35mm shot, but you might feel differently. It's definitely not ideal for vlogging if you're vlogging with the rear cameras, but in that case, you could always use the ultra wide, get more in your shot. Depends on you, depends how you like to use the phone. The selfie camera is a mixed bag because I thought the photos looked better from the selfie camera on the Ultra, but in video, it's really quite shaky. I don't think it looks worse quality-wise, but they need to improve the stabilization. Maybe they will in the future. And of course, there's also the telephoto adapter and camera kit available for the Vivo X200 Ultra, which I've not covered in this video. I just wanted to focus on the phones, but I've got other videos about that. You can check them out if you're interested. So you can expand the functionality of the X200 Ultra, whereas an equivalent accessory doesn't really exist for the X200 Pro. That said, the X200 Pro is global and there are advantages that come with that. I have managed to move into the X200 Ultra full time, but setting it up was quite a hassle. I've managed to get contactless payments working with Google Wallet. My banking apps work fine, and after a bit of tinkering, I'm getting my notifications in a timely manner. But it took a lot of setting up, and I think if you use a Wear OS smartwatch, you might be out of luck. Android Auto I haven't been able to try, but you know, there are certain things to consider when you use a Chinese device outside of China, and you don't have to worry about them if you get the global X200 Pro because everything will work like it would on any other Android phone. Is it worth the tinkering to overcome these? Obviously I thought so, but you might feel differently. So yeah, let me know what you think in the comments. Stay tuned if you like this kind of thing because there's always more on the way, and I will catch you in the next one. Toodles.